Years ago, I found myself in a long-distance weekend relationship. She had ventured to another city for her studies, and deep down, we both knew it was a matter of time before the inevitable end. The complicating factor in our relationship was her best friend, F. He was gay, exuberantly flamboyant, and had an insatiable appetite for attention. I must admit, I didn't particularly like him. F. was overly committed to masquerading as a local boy, complete with a contrived accent. I, on the other hand, was genuinely from that city and had no trace of an accent. Most people from my hometown, myself included, had outgrown regional accents. One day, while chatting with my girlfriend, I could hear F shouting something in the background. "Have you told him yet?" Those words set off an alarm in my head, and I couldn't help but inquire, "Told me what?" Reluctantly, she confessed that they had slept together. She assured me that she intended to reveal it to me in her own time. It wasn't the act itself that infuriated me. I wasn't the type to harbor jealousy, and we hadn't explicitly established exclusivity. What rankled was that he had stolen her chance to come clean, and I was almost certain he did it deliberately to drive a wedge between us. Now, while my initial reaction was to impulsively jump on a train and confront him face to face, I realized that it wasn't the most mature course of action. It was also, needless to say, illegal. Sitting alone in my room, I ruminated on the situation. Eventually, a more calculated idea formed. Growing up in this city had left me with some local connections. I decided to call my former classmate, Ollie, who still resided there. I shared my plan with him, and he found it oddly amusing. In fact, he was all in. F lived in a trendy yet budget-friendly neighborhood teeming with foreigners, particularly Turks and Arabs. Conveniently, Ollie and his brothers happened to be Turkish and could blend right in. So, what did they do? They waited until a time when they knew F would be home. The guy had a consistent television show routine. They knocked on his door, and when he answered, they launched into an elaborate performance. Ollie and his brothers informed him that they knew he was selling drugs to children and that they were watching his every move. They cautioned him, warning that if they ever caught him. In truth, F wasn't peddling drugs to children, but he had introduced my girlfriend to cocaine, an experience she didn't particularly enjoy. The encounter, however, rattled him significantly. Just for the fun of it, Ollie and his brothers, and later some of their friends, tailed F discreetly, always keeping their distance. They didn't maintain this facade for long, but paranoia has an uncanny way of leveling the playing field. F was convinced that he was under constant surveillance. Every Turkish or Arab face in the crowd became a potential spy. Panic set in, and after 3 weeks of this relentless psychological warfare, F finally threw in the towel and fled back home to his mother, many miles away. In the end, my relationship with the girl eventually came to an amicable close a few months later. The whole episode served as a wild and bizarre chapter in my life, one that I won't be forgetting anytime soon. It was a crowded day at the theme park, and I had secured VIP tickets for a special event. I was excited to watch the show, but there was a slight problem. I'm not particularly tall, standing at just 157 centimeters. I found myself sandwiched between the heads of a tall couple, who were just as engrossed in the show as I was. As the performance unfolded, the man in front of me shifted his weight abruptly, and his elbow unintentionally jabbed me square in the chest. The pain shot through me, and I couldn't help but wince. In an ideal world, he would have turned, apologized, and we could have all enjoyed the show in peace. But life doesn't always play out that way. What irked me even more than the throbbing ache in my chest was his blatant lack of acknowledgement. He knew he had collided with someone, as evidenced by that brief turn he took. I couldn't let this slight pass without a response. Summoning my inner pettiness, I devised a subtle yet satisfying revenge plan. Clad in platform boots that were surprisingly hefty, I waited for the perfect moment. When it arrived, I feigned an accidental shift, making it seem as though I was attempting to find a better viewing angle. In that calculated instant, my boot met the back of his shoe. He turned around abruptly, probably wondering if I'd noticed. However, I decided to keep my expression a masterpiece of innocence, utterly absorbed in the show as though nothing had transpired. From that point on, the show took on an extra layer of enjoyment for me. I couldn't help but savor my small victory, knowing that sometimes, the best way to deal with life's accidental jabs is with an equally clever, albeit subtle, response. In a suburban steakhouse tucked away in the outskirts of the city, Kate worked as a server. She'd witnessed her fair share of demanding customers and occasional nuisances, but nothing quite prepared her for the table of four that would haunt her memory for months to come. These diners, all in their early 20s, seemed to make it their mission to transform Kate's shift into a turbulent ordeal. Their behavior was both confounding and exasperating. They played a maddening game of culinary flip-flop, initially ordering the rump steak, only to claim, upon its arrival, that they had ordered the ribeye. They asked for their steaks medium rare but abruptly changed their minds, insisting they preferred them well done, almost as if they were testing her patience. Their capriciousness extended to trivialities, complaints about lipstick stains on glass rims and the sudden disappearance of forks, which they lamented on not one, not two, but 3 separate occasions. Their ludicrous demands created a spectacle that disrupted the entire restaurant. Kate had to contend with their erratic demands and the ensuing chaos. As the minutes ticked by, the atmosphere grew tense. The commotion at her table had drawn the attention of nearby diners, and it became increasingly clear that the situation had spiraled out of control. With her calm demeanor under duress, Kate sought help from the restaurant's manager. This episode of culinary chaos required his expertise. The manager addressed the situation with grace and authority, making the bold decision to comp half of their bill in a bid to quell the chaos and prevent further disturbances. He knew that the customer isn't always right, especially when the customer's antics border on absurdity. Fast forward 8 or 9 months, and a twist of fate found Kate, her manager, who happened to be a close family friend, and a couple of Kate's friends in the bustling heart of the city. They were seated at the renowned rock restaurant to celebrate Kate's successful completion of her university studies. What they couldn't have predicted was the unforeseen encounter with their server from that fateful night months earlier. The server who had tormented Kate and her companions, both through absurd orders and unreasonable complaints, was now the one taking their orders. Astonishingly, she didn't recognize Kate or the manager. As they sat down, a sense of poetic justice hung in the air. However, Kate's mature response was to outwit and outclass her tormentor. It wasn't vengeance she sought, but a lesson in empathy and perspective. Her plan was to remind the server of the ripple effect of her actions, how it feels to be on the receiving end of a customer's capriciousness. Petty as it may seem, it was an attempt to foster understanding, albeit in an unconventional way. The evening took a dramatic turn as Kate and her party decided to mimic the behavior they had once endured. They began to replicate the complaints and demands that had been thrust upon them, treating the server exactly as they had been treated. For their grand finale, the time came to settle the bill. With a sense of poetic justice that only the universe could provide, they requested a conversation with the restaurant's manager. As he approached the table, he found Kate and her companions eager to recount the absurdity of the past and, quite literally, show the server the bill, except this was not just any bill, but a photo of the docket from that infamous night 8 months prior. The restaurant manager, now armed with knowledge of the server's past actions and understanding the full context, recognized the opportunity to make amends. Instead of seeking retribution, he chose compassion and equity. To demonstrate his commitment to fostering a culture of empathy and fairness, he comped the entire meal for Kate and her companions. The server's tips would bear the brunt of this decision, a fitting conclusion to a story where justice was served not through revenge, but through the gentle persuasion of understanding and accountability. The evening concluded on a note of reconciliation rather than rivalry. It was a reminder that a taste of one's own medicine can sometimes be the most potent remedy for empathy. During my high school days in the years 2017 to 2018, I found myself in an IT specialty class. We were a small group of 8, with a fantastic teacher who made our introduction to programming with Python an enjoyable experience. The class was fun, and I was genuinely learning. At the end of the school year, we had a challenging exam project. The task was to choose or propose a project in pairs, work on it, and then present it individually, explaining what worked, what didn't, and how we overcame challenges. I teamed up with the only girl in our class, which seemed like a stroke of luck at the time. Together, we decided to create a command line chess game, and we managed to get it working, albeit a bit wonky. We even figured out how to properly display the chessboard, but after the project, things took an unexpected turn. Over the first vacation after the project, I didn't hear anything from my partner. It was complete silence. A bit concerned, I decided to put in some extra work. The day before school started again, she finally contacted me with an excuse about losing her internet connection. She provided a minuscule amount of work, but I decided to let it slide. Once we returned to class, the pattern continued. She never brought her work and always had a ready excuse, such as forgetting her USB drive or taking the wrong one. It became a recurring theme. I grew suspicious, and after discussing the situation with my teacher, he confirmed that I should proceed with the project on my own. He assured me that my grade in the teamwork section would not be affected. Now, it was time for a little petty revenge. The current version of the chess game was far from playable, riddled with bugs, and needed extensive improvement. I decided to dedicate the second vacation, just 1 week long, to fixing it. I ironed out as many bugs as I could, making it genuinely playable. There were still some complicated issues to resolve, but I was a beginner, and time was running short. My plan was to keep my improved version hidden for the presentation. Throughout the vacation, we communicated via Facebook, and I noticed something peculiar. Her account remained online the entire time. I sent her messages inquiring about her progress and got read receipts, but she never responded. So, I decided not to share my working version with her. On presentation day, it was an individual task with the teacher. She wasn't present, so I went first due to my place in the alphabet. The presentation went remarkably well, and the teacher was genuinely impressed. As I concluded my presentation, I decided to make a statement. The most important thing I learned during this project is the significance of teamwork. As you all know, my partner contributed very little to the code, and this continued through the last vacation. Unfortunately, the small bugs that remain in the program could have been fixed if I had a fully committed teammate. The teacher gave me an approving nod, but the expression on his face spoke volumes. I left the room, knowing he understood what I meant. It was her turn to present. I later heard that she had been in tears after her presentation. Whenever we crossed paths in school, she couldn't hide her resentment and gave me what I like to call the hate look. Needless to say, she was livid. When the grades were finally in, she received a 9/20, while I got a 14/20. I decided not to contact her again, and our collaboration ended there. There was no love story for me, but I certainly felt a sense of vindication. Good riddance to an uncommitted partner.
During my early days in my first apartment, I encountered a neighborly dispute that led to some rather petty actions on my part. It became apparent pretty quickly that the apartment complex didn't excel in soundproofing because I could hear my neighbors chatting inside their units, which, in itself, wasn't much of an issue. However, my peaceful coexistence was soon disrupted when a new neighbor moved in directly above me. He was a night shift worker, and our schedules occasionally overlapped, leading to some intense conflicts. This fellow got incredibly irate if my daytime activities, even unintentional ones, disrupted his slumber. His attempts to communicate his discontent were far from neighborly. He'd bang on my door or bellow at me through the ceiling. On one memorable occasion, in his frustration, he jumped so vigorously that he actually broke the cover off my kitchen light while I was merely vacuuming around 11 in the morning. Our property management remained unresponsive, which added to my vexation. Thankfully, my tenure in that apartment was relatively short, lasting only a few months after this particular neighbor's arrival. On my moving day, I saw an opportunity for a bit of payback. I waited until he and his deadbolt keyhole could get no rest, then I executed my revenge. Armed with a 5-minute self-mixing epoxy in a syringe-type tube, I filled his deadbolt keyhole to ensure that his entry was quite problematic. I departed before the situation could unravel further, leaving my former neighbors to ponder the key to their conundrum. While I didn't witness the aftermath, I've often wondered about their reaction.